everyone, and welcome to Daily Spark TV. Wishing you, of course, a beautiful and happy holiday season. I'm so glad that you were able to join me here today. Now, you know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, I'm really excited today because my guest, Maggie Richardson, is going to talk about her book, The Sky is the Limit. Now, you know that's a great title. Of course, I had to have her on. You know what I'm going to tell you to do then? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea because we are about to get started. Hello, Maggie. Thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark TV.
You're welcome, but the title is The Sky is Not the Limit.
I'm sorry, the sky is not the limit. Yes, it is not the limit. Yes, we want to break all of those ceilings. Thank you for that. I apologize.
That's okay.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Now, before we get started talking about your book, I usually like to spend some time introducing my guests to perhaps those one or two people out there that are unfamiliar with your work. So, my question always is what makes you you?
Well, I guess I'm just a crazy Kiwi. I was born in New Zealand. I came to Australia. I love it here. I love it in New Zealand. And I just like being with people and talking to interesting people. And you get lots of ideas that way.
You're right. You really are. People, in their own way, are a wealth of information. Even if they have limited beliefs or limited ways of thinking, that just gives you one more idea of a way that you can come up with a workaround or something to encourage that person to keep going. So I agree with you there. Now, being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do, or did you
Yeah.
find that that was just the next thing on your life path?
No, I think I've always been a writer of some kind. I can remember writing a story about Whiskers, my cat, when I was quite small. I haven't got a copy of that one now, but I had to write that story, and then I write a lot of poetry. And somebody said to me one time, like, how do you get an idea for the poetry? And they said, how do you write poetry? And I go, you don't. It writes itself. You get an idea, somebody makes a chance comment, and all of a sudden it's whirring. And I have this way of writing where I've always got to know the end before I write the beginning. I've got to know where I'm going. And that's why I couldn't write a book I was trying to write when I was out in the country, because I didn't know how it was going to end. But even with a poem, I'll have the last line before I write the first one.
I can understand that. It's like the people who say that they like to read the last page of the novel before they read the first page of the novel. It just simply makes sense for you in that way. And I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. If that's how you are creative, then I think that's a beautiful thing. Now, the title of your book, The Sky is Not the Limit. Um, how did you come about such a title? Some people will say, "I just woke up with the idea one day." Others will say it came out of the writings. How did you come about the title?
It was sort of, as I was writing the book, it sort of came to me because the guy I'm writing about, Ross Hutchison, he just takes on one more thing and one more thing and one more thing, and he doesn't do it half-heartedly. For instance, he had illness while he was going through his dance career, and they took him to an osteopath. He didn't know it was an osteopath. He just knew they took him somewhere. He got fixed. Then he wanted to know, how did that guy do that, and where do I learn that? And so then he'd go and learn something else. So he always sort of had to learn more about whatever he was interested in.
Hmm.
So it just seemed like he was just climbing the ladder. There wasn't any barriers in any way. He just said, okay, this is what we've got to do.
Hmm. Now, when you were writing, did you have a particular group or an ideal reader in mind as you were writing, or did you find that once you were done, the book is appropriate for all ages?
It's really appropriate for all ages because it's an inspirational book to watch, to read about him. People have read it and said, "Oh, what a wonderful man. He did so much in his life." And we say, "Yes, he did. He just kept going and he's still doing it." That's why I put it republished because we had in the last 5 years, it was published 5 years ago, and since then he's kept on doing things. And then this year he was awarded the Australian Medal of Honour for his work within the community. And I thought, right, it's time to upgrade the book.
Absolutely. You have to include that type of accolade. That is bravo moment. Mhm. Mhm.
And
No.
he is such an interesting character.
Yes.
You know, you want to talk to him or you want to keep talking to him or listening to him because he's just got such wonderful viewpoints on things.
Mhm. Now, how did you decide to go down this particular lane? You could have written about anyone. Why did you decide upon this person?
Well, I'd already written, I did a poetry book in '92 as an exercise for my class, an exercise on costing products. And then I wrote a book about starting a business in Australia, which led to another one which I got under contract. And then I didn't have a project on hand other than writing my own little stories. And I founded the Australian Small Business Centre in Sydney. And one of my students, clients, whatever you want to call them, said to me, "There's a man out at Penrith that needs your help." And I said, "Okay." So I went out to Penrith. This is an hour drive on the freeway. And there was a meeting of people who are running spiritual churches. And at that stage, people with spiritual churches, they just opened it up themselves. They kept the money for themselves. It wasn't a consolidated group. And Ross was trying to get it just so that it was all the same. Everybody had the same rules. And then when I went there, he said to me, "What do you do?" And I said, "I write." At that stage, I had no writing project on the go other than business plans for people coming into Australia, which is quite a challenge in itself. And he said, "Oh, good, you can write my book." And I go, "Oh, yeah, okay, rightio," like you do at a party. Yeah, okay. And then I didn't see him for another 2 years because I never thought any more about it. And a friend and I went out to his church in Penrith for some meditation. And I said to my friend, "Hang on a minute, I want to hang around and see Ross before I go." So we sat in on this church service. And he starts out and says, "Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you, blah, blah. And that lady over in the corner there, standing in the corner, she's going to write my book." And I went, "Oh, whatever." I'd better get my finger out because I hadn't even thought about it. Because you know how people flippantly say, "Oh, happening,"
Right.
but there wasn't enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Talking about right place, right time, and being called to your purpose. I love that. I love it. Now, when you were actually going through the process of writing, did you find that you needed to be alone, like separated off from others, away from the distraction? Or did the distraction of the day, the hustle and bustle of the day, did that bother you at all?
No, no hustle and bustle around me. What I did was I said to Ross, "Look, I'll come out to you at Penrith, which is an hour drive, and give me an hour and just tell me whatever you want to tell me about your life, and I'll write it down." What I found was that I couldn't get a word in edgeways because other people were ringing him, and I just sat there having a cup of coffee, waiting for him to, and then my hour was up. And I said, "This isn't going to work, Ross. What I want you to do is I want you to ring me. I will be at home with a computer in front of me. I will type everything you say, mistakes and all, and then when we get off the phone, I'll correct it, and we follow from there. And then sometimes he'd be saying blah 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 about John, whatever, and he was involved in this, and he couldn't remember the last name of John. So it was my job to go when we went back together the next week to say, okay, when we were talking about whatever, there was a John there involved. Can you remember his last name? Or, you know, there was one guy who wrote some plays that won competitions in Europe, and we needed the names of the plays, right? So he had to get that information for me for the next time we were talking. But it was interesting. And the other thing was that sometimes I sort of think in terms of you can't really, with somebody like Ross, you can't really go, okay, on day one we did this, on day two we did this, and day three, because he would do all three activities on one day. Right? In the morning he's going and getting some lessons. Oh, I don't believe it. He's going and getting some lessons. Call me back. And he's getting some dance lessons because he knew every dance form. And then he would be going over to one theatre and he'd be playing maybe two character actors in a play. Then he'd go and get some tea, and then he'd go to another theatre and he'd be playing something else at the night time, different play altogether, different dance. And he was a dancer, a singer, a choreographer, magnificent choreographer. Just he danced with, like, now I can see him. I can't see him. He's a black Negro dancer. Sammy Davis Jr. He danced with, he's a good friend of his. He danced with Liza Minnelli, Benny Hill, did the choreography for them. You know, he was right up there with all the big boys. But he's just a little guy. He's like a jockey. But he loved horses, and that was part of his career as well. So when you look at the cover of the book, you can see this guy on the gig, and that's him. And he's breeding horses, and he was taking. He went down to visit his brother, and his brother was breeding the harness horses, and he had never encountered the harness horses. Anyway, the brother says, "Hop on, give it a go." So he hops on, and around he goes, and he comes round and he goes, "This is great! I'm going round again." Round again. Oh, I'm going round again. You know, I'll see you next time round. And of course he fell in love with it. Then he went to college to learn what you had to do to become a A-class driver in the races. So everything he attempted, he didn't attempt it from a hobby point of view. He attempted it from a professional point of view. Mm-hmm. So he learned a lot about healthcare. He said to me one time when we were talking about when he was at school, and he loved playing football, and of course the kids used to tease him because he was a dancer. They said, "Dancing footballer, you know, you're no good. You're just a dancing footballer." And so he arranged for wrestling matches in the hall, and they'd all go in one by one, and nobody could beat him. And he said, somebody should have told them, you never pick on a ballet dancer.
Never.
Your leg muscles are so strong. You might have been just a little guy, but
I don't know when they're gonna learn. You don't mess with the little guy, because the little guy has been the little guy for so long. He's learned how to defend himself. He's not gonna just take your stuff and be able to protect himself. So good for him. Good for him.
So there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces in the book of episodes through his life. You know, he went deep sea diving. He loved fishing, and I didn't know that. When I wrote the book, I tried to put it into like activities rather than chronological. Mm-hmm. So we had these activities, and then during this year, I wrote the film script for the book. And I was writing it and I was thinking, hang on a minute, we've got the deep sea diving bit, which is further into the book. And I rang him up and I said, how long were you interested in deep sea diving? And he said, I've always been interested in fishing. I used to take my rods and reels to the shows, put them at the back, and when the show was over, you know what it's like on stage. When the show's over, you're still feeling the high, right? So you just take them down to the beach and just sit there and maybe fish or whatever.
Yeah, and
so
decompress a little.
Scripts, I had to go back into the story and give them hints along the way that this was coming up. So writing the book was different to writing a film script.
I love that, because you're right. You do still feel that buzz. You feel that energy that it took to get you through that moment. And what a beautiful way to kind of keep yourself grounded, if you will, to kind of reconnect with nature and just to have that moment. Fishing can be such a big. I personally do not fish. I know people who do, and when I go with them, it is relaxing. It's really enjoyable. So I could see how that would work. Now, I like that you said that if I understand correctly, that you don't really have chapters that are arranged chronologically, but more so by activity. I like that. Why was it important for you to put it together by activity? Did you want it to be an easier read, or was it simply to help paint the picture better?
Well, it was really to paint the picture better because if you take an activity like he did before television, he was on the stage and they were putting on pantomimes. And the people involved in those pantomimes, the people who were involved in those, my cat's come to say hello, um, were in the pantomimes. He named them all. So they're all famous people. And so there's a whole list, it's like a list of people that were around at that time. And even the guy, but I could name them all. I can't name them all, but because they're just too many. And what I found was that we'd start off with, I tried to keep it as close as I could to what was happening. So we had the on-stage stuff, the pantomime stuff, and then we kind of like had television, when television was starting here, we had chess television, and so the little bit about that, how it worked, and I can remember that myself. And then going next door to the neighbour's place to see television for the first time, and then he would be on stage, so he was helping a show called Bandstand that was very famous, and they would put on shows and he'd do the choreography. He'd be the dancer in a lot of them. Didn't do a lot of singing, but he, if it was part of it, he'd be in little plays and things. So there was always something happening that was a little bit different. There's one guy who had Ellie. He had a Black American dance troupe, and he only had Black American dancers. And Ross was the only person who was white skinned who was allowed to dance with him.
Wow.
So that kind of level of commitment.
Yeah.
That, I always go, oh. And he was talking to me about Mary Greer, who used to have to teach the kids dancing. And so he would often call on her dancers to back a song or something like that. And how recently, she's in her 80s now, and she took a group of people over to Melbourne for a competition, and they won nearly all the medals. And he calls her Dame Mary Greer, right?
Yeah.
But I remember him first as Humphrey Bear. Do you remember Humphrey Bear? No, you didn't have Humphrey Bear on your television. Humphrey Bear is he played inside Hungry Bear and half a dozen other characters on the kids' shows.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh,
he could be on a show at night time.
mm-hmm.
He could go and have a sleep. He'd get woken up to do the kids' show, and it might be Basil Brush or something that's teaching the kids how to brush their teeth. And he would mess around with and do all that sort of stuff. So he was very much involved in those.
Okay. Okay. See, I tell you, people that work in their passion, they do whatever they need to do to make sure that it happens. And that to me is just one of the things that really inspires me to keep going. That there's always someone that you can look to that says, utilize all the hours of the day that you've been given to do everything that you possibly can because someone is watching. I don't mean like watching um, um, for the bad, but watching and taking it in for the good.
Serving, yes.
I love that. Now, the last question for you, and I try to always wrap up my interviews in this way, be it that we are inspirational TV, we are faith TV. Um, my question to you is how do you believe that your faith has gotten you through? Not necessarily do you go to church on Sundays or what denomination you are, not that part, but just how do you think that your belief has gotten you to where you are today?
I believe there is a path that's been laid out, and if you're watching, you can see it. You can see where you're going. Because what I find is that people will cross my path. People will say something to me, or something very small, and I go right. And I'll give you, for instance, is I went. Um, I was living out on a farm. My husband was a builder, and he came home one day and he said, all the people down at the grain things, they want me to build a computer room. And we were living on this little farm. He drove the car over to the big sty to feed the pigs, and in that 10 seconds, whatever it was, they had on the radio, they were looking for people, for women particularly, in the country who wanted to work in an office. And he came back and told me, and I said, okay. And so I rang up Gunnedah, which is 100 k's away, to see if I could go out. I couldn't go out and see the people until I'd gone and put my name down, because this is a work program. And I did that, and I went out and I got the job based on the fact that about 3 weeks before that, I had organised, well, I'd organised it before that, but I said, I need to learn something to do with computers. How can I do that? And so a friend of mine who teaches outreach at the cave, she said, gather a group of people together and we'll come to you.
Mm.
So I did that. I rang around the farmers, got them together for these 2 weekends. They bought the computers. I had one day on the computers when I felt really sick, but I had this one day, and then during this week between the two is when Colin went over to Big Sky, and I got this job based on my computer knowledge
Wow.
of what an afternoon.
Wow.
And the fact that I did no office routines. But there was a path there that was going.
Yeah.
And then I went from there to teaching other things, and I came back into teaching with Skillshare and everything. So
I love it.
I was sort of led back into teaching.
Absolutely. What is meant for you is meant for you. And I love that. I really do. Well, it is just amazing. Like you said, if we open our eyes and we listen, we can definitely see and hear the plan that God has for our lives. I love it. Now, before I let you go, can you please remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of the book is The Sky is Not the Limit. Talent is only the beginning. You can get it from Amazon, or it's on Kindle. Just sent out a thing this morning. They were selling it for $3.63. I think got to go get that. And and I am on Facebook, and I have. Can I sneak this in? While I was republishing, I was publishing some of my poems.
I love it.
And, yeah, and that's the other one that's on Kindle and Facebook. And so I can recite you one of the very short ones.
Yes.
You got time?
Sure.
Okay. A butterfly landed on my hand today and rested momentarily, clawing into my fingers and my heart. Made me think of you, and the brief moment you made me feel so special.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing and giving that additional bit of inspiration to us. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for being on Daily Spark TV today.
You're welcome, and welcome to all the people from America or wherever you go.
For viewers, thank you for spending time with us as well. As always, may you continue to know that God loves you, and may you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have the past few weeks or months been challenging? Yes, for all of us. We've been thrown into circumstances which we could never have imagined. Loss of jobs, working from home, general uncertainty, all while dealing with COVID. It's causing us to be a little on edge. If you need someone to talk to, Dr. Angela Chester can help. Visit newlifepastoralcounseling.com to get started. We're in this together.
Hi, do you have something to share? Be a guest. Want to sponsor an episode? Visit drangela.chester.com. Thanks again for watching Daily Spark TV.